and blessed unity.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Self-Love Show. I am your host today, Trish Wright, and let's twinkle Dawn, who's out and about for a moment. Mwah! And we have an amazing guest today that I'm so excited to have on again. Not only is she one of my friends, but she has so much knowledge and so much information to share and impart with you in so many different fields. So, hi, Kim. How you doing?
Hello, I'm doing good.
As always, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, oh gosh, all of the podcast platforms, Facebook, Twitch, and X. So I'll put the links in a little later. All right, let me read to you what we're talking about today. So, Cult Proof Your Life, a guide to recognizing subtle and covert manipulations, mind control, and toxic people. Nobody joins a cult, you only leave them. But what is a cult in the first place? We often think of them as extreme groups and religions, but cults come in all shapes and sizes, from toxic and abusive one-on-one relationships, families, businesses, spiritual groups, and more. In this episode, Kim Peirano, with all of these accolades, I'll let you talk about those. We'll shed some light on practical ways to recognize coercive control before you're in deep. Drawing from her professional and personal experience, she gives you tangible tools, red flags, and key highlights to navigating life, leaders, and groups safely. Kim Peirano brings a wealth of expertise as a seasoned and highly skilled Jungian-based life coach and hypnotherapist, specializing in areas such as chronic pain and illness, navigating major life transitions, cult and coercive recovery, and providing general support for people and spiritual growth. Kim caters to high-functioning individuals seeking profound transformation. Her extensive qualifications include a doctorate in acupuncture and Chinese medicine, a dual board licensed acupuncturist, and certifications as a Jungian life coach and a hypnotherapist. With over 15 years of dedicated experience, Kim establishes a neutral yet inviting space, offering invaluable guidance to clients on their healing journeys. Her approach is characterized by support, compassion, and the ability to gently usher individuals beyond their comfort zones and empowering them to step forward into a life of vibrant fulfillment. Fantastic. We had some conversations about the larger communities of that were particularly kind of cultish and abusive behaviors, and it comes in a lot of forms. We had many conversations. Was it last year or the year before that?
Mm-hmm.
And it was really about, like, I had shared this feeling in my earlier, like in my 20s, where I was really seeking community and asking for, like, I was asking for help. I was seeking community, I was seeking belonging, asking for help, and what I was getting is this sort of like, oh, think positively and put your mind to it, and anything, like, it was really this without having any foundation of, like, oh, I actually have trauma in my life that I need to deal with, and it's like you're just band-aiding this and like washing over some things, and it really messed me up. So I think that's where I was coming from in this kind of conversations about cultish behavior, is like this cult of new age belief systems, which is kind of elusive because there's no leader. But I'm curious a little bit about what has inspired this for you to, like, talk about this.
Oh, well, I mean, that goes down to my personal experience and personal story, where I basically spent 8 years in a new age, like, meditation cult, which, like all cults, like, when you join, they're super helpful and, like, change your life. And then at some point in time, it totally turns as you kind of go deeper and deeper into the inner workings of those groups or that relationship or whatever it is, that kind of manipulation and how it really impacts you, because it's a thing that slowly builds over time. And yeah, so like part of my healing and deconstruction from that whole experience was around like learning more about what is coercive control, what is a cult, because we don't like generally have that knowledge, right? Like we think of like Heaven's Gate and Jonestown, but we don't think of how this might personally affect us because we're like, oh, I'd never do that. But like turns out you probably would. It's just how it shows up is like kind of hard to put your finger on. And then with my like coaching and all of these things kind of bridge together. And I work with a lot of people who live with like chronic pain and illness, and how like alternative health and wellness shows up in this space too. I just did a talk at the International Cultic Studies Association conference on that specific topic. Like, how does this show up in this space, and how can we keep ourselves safe with that?
You're so cool. I've surprisingly, probably unsurprisingly to you, one of my hyper focuses has been the Jonestown. And I've spent maybe like 20 hours researching this whole thing because I'm always curious, like, how did this come to be? And again, when you said it comes from, it's very helpful at the beginning. And Jim Jones and the, is it like the People's Temple? Like this whole thing started out of a sort of collectivist belief system brought from the East Coast. They came over to California, and they were really trying to help like low income build communities, and that's what their whole like platform was. That's how people started just like getting rid of their homes and like giving them to this People's Temple so that they could like feed the poor. And it was like really had like a foundation of community. And I think that a lot of cults really touch on the sense of belonging and the sense of connection. So, I mean, especially living in an individualistic society where we definitely, like, I don't know about you, but I long for community. I long for family and belonging. And I think that that's one of the key points. I don't know if you agree with that.
Oh, totally. And it's like, you know, there's many facets in the whole thing. I think that as far as like when we're looking at groups, individuals, like, or industries, like what kind of things leave that particular thing open to this type of abuse, right? Because it's like there's a lot happening in spirituality spaces, right? Where it's like churches and religions and new age stuff. MLMs fall into the category of cults where there's a lot of abuse that takes place. Like alternative medicine is another place where this, like, you know, and there's the really positive and helpful things, and then there's the really negative things. So it's always on this spectrum. But I think like the key thing is like that group, that person, the program, like whatever it is, it's like sold to you as this means to answer an unanswerable question. Right. And so it's like in religion and spirituality, that might be what happens when I die? What's the point of my life? Like, how do I get off the wheel of karma or like go to heaven? Like nobody actually knows that answer. There's no answer. But somebody comes along and they tell you they have that answer. That feels super soothing and good. And we're like, oh, I'm really curious. In like MLMs or business things, it's like, how do I make money without having a real job? Or how do I make money really fast? Yeah. Here's your magic ticket, right? In relationships, it might be like am I going to be alone forever? Or like, how do I find that partner I've been longing for? And some of these do have answers, but they're not always like the big sparkly ones that we want to hear, right? Yeah. And so like community is for sure part of that. And then it gets wrapped into why it gets so hard to leave, because that contributes to the exit costs of leaving that community, right? If you're like, oh, I need to leave, but that's where all my friends are. Maybe it's where you literally live. Yeah. It gets really expensive in that sense to leave the group.
In emotional ways and physical and financial ways, because then you have to like create it's like leaving an abusive relationship. You know, I have
basically the same.
You know, I put 10 grand on a credit card to leave her in a really abusive relationship because I didn't have the support. one of the things I see this a lot, especially in coaching programs. I've seen a lot of coaching programs go on, and I've purchased some coaching programs and got totally caught up in it. And it's the very like gregarious leader that you're like, oh, I can do that. And they're like, I've got this thing. You just have to follow the steps. And if you don't follow the steps and you don't, then you won't get the results. And if you don't get the results, it's because you didn't follow the steps. And it's like, hey, not
Totally.
everything for everyone,
Yeah.
Um, let's talk a little bit about, you know, recently I've been really hearing a lot of people in my life um, kind of start coming out about their experiences as growing up in cults. So one of my friends was in like a subset of the Mormon religion. Like it was in like an even deeper sort of subset of it, and just how long it's taken them to unravel some of that trauma and that emotional mindset. And some people like getting caught up in like their parents were in, oh god, what was it, a tantra community, like off a side shoot of off in the bay, that they were all living together, and like,
Mhm.
and how they didn't know it was cultish, and they thought that that was the way of life, but now they look back and they didn't have the freedoms to think for themselves or to leave. And so I'm just curious, like, can you talk to us a little bit about, how do I know that I'm in a cult? How does it feel? Like,
Totally. Um, well, so there's so many ways we can approach this question, right?
mhm,
Um, how do we know we're in a cult? Like, kind of, I think of something I say often is like, there's no relationship I ended that I wish I didn't end it sooner, right? Like, when you kind of have that feeling of leaving, um, like what's the next steps? Like, and what comes up when we think about that, right? If I'm thinking about like, oh, this group might, like, it's not feeling right anymore, what comes up when I think about leaving? For me, like in my experience, was like there were a lot of like implanted phobias and fears, and that's something that happens really commonly, right? It's like, oh, if you leave, your life is going to fall apart. You hear stories about other people who leave where they got cancer or their house is burnt down or they got divorced or like all of these terrible things happened. So there's this like subset of fear underlying, like, what will happen to me when I leave? I'll be totally lost, right? And that goes into, again, those like high exit costs of being there. Lots of times we just feel kind of stuck where in these types of situations, like doubt, questioning, criticism, critiques, like that's all really downplayed and not like, you know, not allowed within that group. And there's different types of what we call thought stopping techniques that we use to just like quell that stuff instantaneously. So
mhm,
it's like you say, like, I have this question about where this information came from, and you're told to meditate on it. You're told to do a chant, or like it's like some other thing to distract you from that crux of the real question. Um, and of course, there's like all of the different qualities and characteristics of cults. And I think like for most people, we don't have that information of like what is this? What does it look like? What's the framework to describe it? And that's like the key to keeping ourselves safe from this type of harm, is like actually knowing what it looks like. Because when you're in a group like this, like you said, like they thought this was the way, right? It's like we think this is the ultimate truth of whatever it is. And like when we start learning about other cults or just the premise of coercive control, it becomes starkly clear that like this is not original at all. For me, that was like a huge piece where I was like, this isn't unique in any sort of way. Like we've been told the whole time you're like this special person for showing up here. You're so special because you're like in this level or like whatever it is. Like, and I think of that as like a flavor of love bombing too, where in some groups it's like that, like the Moonies were very like those like glossed over happy face. Like it doesn't always have to be like that, where people are like, I love you, we're so glad you're here. Love bombing makes you feel special. It makes you feel chosen. And that's the important piece, is like not how it really comes across. It could be because you're super smart, right? Like it makes you feel chosen. Um, and so, yeah, like when we understand like how this works and what it looks like, it becomes A, easier to spot, and B, like that's in the back of our mind so we can recognize it when we might wind up in it, because it's kind of easy to wind up in it,
Oh,
unfortunately.
can I share a little reflection of the things that I remember talking to you about?
Sure.
I remember when we were kind of just like bantering back and forth, and I was like, I don't. Do you feel free here? I remember like really like, tell me like you dread this and you're unhappy and there's like you keep asking questions, like you keep kind of like asking about this person's qualifications, and you keep asking like you're pushing back a little bit, and the way that they were treating you, I remember I don't exactly remember like the specifics, but I remember feeling a little like stabby about it. Protective. I felt really, I was like, wait, that doesn't sound like if I went to my mentor and was like, whoa, yo, like I have some questions, that person would probably sit down with me and be like, okay, what's going on? And they wouldn't have like she wouldn't like shoo me away. She was like, no, you've got a question and I see your concern and I want to like get in with you. And I remember also like the particular like group and individual like public shaming in that. There was some like do I remember that correctly? That there was some like some shaming of like people within the group publicly. Do I remember
Not
that? Okay.
totally, but like sort of. Like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, within the group, right? It's like anybody who questions anything, it's like you're low vibration, right?
Oh, I hate that. Oh my God, I hate that.
You're talking from your third chakra, right? Like it's like your question gets dumbed down to like how you're delivering the question instead of like actually you have a real question. And I remember like a point like way early on hearing the leader talk about how somebody brought it up in a class, and you learn this like early on, right? Like somebody asked the question, somebody has the balls to do it, and they get just totally taken down, and you're like, oh, that's how this goes.
Yeah.
So the level of critique and questioning comes way down the further you go in, because you've been trained out of it, right? That's part of that like brainwashing and mind control
Yeah.
that becomes really subtle, because you witness it and then you're like, oh, I'm not asking that question.
That's
But he
social.
actually answered like, oh, we don't accept any feedback from any students because you're not at the vibration that means your feedback is truthful, so we don't do that at all. And at the time, because you've been like, these classes that we're in started out with um a hypnosis process, like it's called a meditation, but like basically any meditation that involves visualizing things is hypnosis.
Yeah.
And you were instructed never to really fully come out of that state, which means you're teetering in that like alpha theta brainwave state, which is your super suggestible, like, so you're never fully pulled out of that state. Like everything this person says that even remotely matches something maybe you already kind of believe, like it's just fully accepted. And it was like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. You don't take feedback. That's cool.
I would love to nerd out on covert hypnosis techniques that like, I'm also a trained hypnotist and
Yeah.
many years. And I just was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like just the different styles of hypnosis and like, yeah. And it takes, I mean, you really got to trust the moral, like like the moral direction
Yeah.
that you're like the people that you're following.
Totally.
So I'm curious if you want to just lead us through either a practice or something that you can just share a little bit on here.
Totally. Well, I think like first, like demystifying like who joins a cult in the first place, right? Because we kind of have this idea of like who that person is like somebody who's kind of defected from society or really struggling. And like that might be the case, but cults actually really love very high functioning people because they need you to help them to make their business run, to make the money, to find more people, like to just bolster the power of the leader. So some qualities that like leave us vulnerable to this is like idealism, that desire to belong, like difficulty with our own boundaries or ability to assert our own control or criticism. Maybe we have a low tolerance for ambiguity. So that's that like wanting that unanswerable question answered. We might be susceptible to trance-like states. So that's somebody who's easily hypnotizable. People who are really creative, really visual. In the hypnosis community, we think that people who have migraines with aura like also fall into this category, meaning like you can kind of go into a deeper state pretty easily. We just want spiritual meaning in our life. And of course, like not knowing how coercive control works are all things that leave us vulnerable to that kind of process. So without going into the like many step list of like what makes a cult, I want to tell you about my like mnemonic for remembering this stuff and how we can keep ourselves safe, like ideally at the beginning of possibly getting involved with a person or a group like this. And I use the mnemonic of cult. And so the C is for charisma, confidence, and certainty. This is the qualities that the leader displays, right? They have the answer for you. They have the method for you. They know how to make you $1 million this year, guaranteed, right? That's that certainty. They are confident about it. Usually it's middle-aged white men, but it doesn't have to be. We're kind of conditioned as people to automatically accept what middle-aged white men tell us, like as full truth. So our defenses are even down a little bit in that dynamic if we haven't kind of unpacked that before. So that leader is charismatic, they're certain, they're confident, they're often regarded by like other people in the group as having special abilities or special powers if we're talking about like spirituality. So they're like in this exalted status, can do no wrong in a sense. And they have what you want. And that's like really exciting. The U is for uniqueness, and this is the uniqueness of the group or of the leader or of the person. We can apply all of these to dating as well, like one-on-one relationships. So this person, you know, the method they have is very unique. You're only going to find it here. It's only because this one person has these special abilities that you have access to this. And again, like when we're looking at this whole spectrum of things, none of these are necessarily bad on their own. Like being charismatic is just a personality trait that somebody shows. Like that's not always a bad thing. Having a unique method, also not a bad thing. That's like what sells products, right? Or what sells you on something. It's important to have, but it's like how these things come together and that unanswerable question usually, which is where it kind of gets fuzzy. The L is for love bombing. We talked about that earlier. This is how it makes you feel. So the uniqueness is like the uniqueness of them. The love bombing is the uniqueness of you. You're so special for showing up here in the first place. You were chosen, or you're at this high level because we have this high level information, or in a relationship, right? It's just like, I love you 2 weeks in. And the T is for time pressure or like urgency. So often with business things, right? It's like you need to sign up now to get this deal. In a spiritual group or something, maybe that leader always talks about how he might die soon or he's on borrowed time. So like you have to stay in because the group might not exist anymore. So there's like that pressure to commit or to stay. And so this like group of qualities, what it does, so in and of itself might not necessarily be toxic or harmful at all. It might just be the qualities of that thing. But what it does in us is triggers a dysregulated system. So it's kind of the same feeling we get as we're like I wanted to buy a new mattress on 4th of July and there was this sale, but I couldn't decide. And I'm like, so I have anxiety, fear, and excitement all coming together. So I'm excited about the possibilities of this. There's fear and anxiety. Like, what if I miss out? What if this isn't the right thing? Like, all of this stuff gets heightened. Usually the most potent feeling is excitement. And that's important to remember, is like, that's not a regulated system. And that's like also butterflies and limerence and like those new relationship energy where we get kind of clouded by the physiological process that takes place in our body. So when we notice this, and so we have to start making a commitment to ourselves to like get in touch with that element, right? Like, how do I know how my body's feeling? And we want to commit to just like making decisions from that more regulated space. So if I'm feeling really excited about something, earlier this year, I hired a business coach and I did a lot of sales calls, and a lot of people like push, they're like, oh, you have to sign up. We're only taking this many people. And I'm like, that's my sign to back away. Oh, this thing's super unique. That's my sign to look more deeply into it, right? There's no harm in Googling things, especially if it's like large group awareness trainings, religion, spirituality, things like that. Like, Google the name of it and the word cult and see what shows up. It's kind of profound. So we're going to just remember that like these qualities, which we might not recognize in the moment, but what we can more easily recognize in the moment is like how your body's feeling. Like, before you're signing up for something, take that moment to check in. Like, how am I feeling? Am I feeling really like calm and relaxed right now? Like, that's the feeling that I look for. It's like, do I feel calm and relaxed around you? That's a person I want in my life. That's a person I want to work with. And if I'm not feeling that, we take the time to get to that space. And maybe we do more research, we look into it more, we kind of step back a few steps and really look at what we're facing or thinking of choosing into. And that's kind of the key to helping us become more aware of this. Like, yes, becoming more aware of like coercive control and how that works. One of the other pieces of like what makes a group or an industry vulnerable is like there's often also like lacks of barriers to entry. So like in MLMs, it's just like pay to play, right? You're a health coach as soon as you signed up with the $1,200 package. In spirituality, like some people go to seminary school, but some people just call themselves a pastor. You can sign up for $5 online. In alternative health and wellness, like anybody can call themselves a coach, anybody can call themselves a nutritionist, and even people who have licenses can still act out of integrity as well. And with dating, like, what are your barriers to entry for yourself? Like, what are the things somebody needs to have access to you, or things we need to bring our awareness around and determine for ourselves? So yeah, remember cult, confidence, certainty, uniqueness, love bombing, and time pressure. And remember how your body feels when you're making decisions. And you can practice this all the time. Like, it's great to practice things not when they are in your face, right? Like, so we can practice, how does my body feel when I'm ordering lunch today? Or choosing to do this email over that email. And like, take the time to practice that regulating techniques, which can just be deep breathing. It can be taking a step away. It can be more deeper processes. And those are some of the things that I work with people in my practice.
I love that you have an acronym for this. And no, I mean, I think it's really helpful because people, it's easy to remember, right? And I do want to just touch on something that I think is incredibly important. Moving with the intention of a regulated nervous system and making choices. You said, like, how do they make me feel? Does this person make me feel calm? Is there this urgency and time pressure? And I think that, like, especially when we're like falling in love or new relationship energy, that is a nervous system dysregulation. And that's a whole chemical reaction not based in reality. So I love that you like touched on this place of like, hey, take a step back. Really, like, if you feel excited or overly excited, or it's like too good to be true. Like, oh my God, this is everything I've ever wanted. Take a pause, take a couple of days even. And I think that that's just such epic advice in just the world. um, just, yeah, just epic advice in the world, not just for like looking at whether you're in a cult or not. And I love your examples as well of like how when you're in there, or like, again, it's that too good to be true bit where it's like, oh,
Mhm.
there's this confidence and I've got the answer, and like, like I'm unique, and like, yes, and oh, it's so good. I'm so grateful you're doing this work in the world because it's so necessary, especially in our communities. And I'm really proud of you. Can you tell us a little bit more about how to find you, where to find you? Yeah.
Totally. So a lot of my like culty content and coaching stuff is all on Courage to Transform, which is on Instagram and TikTok, and that's the website couragetotransform.com. And then I also have an in-person acupuncture practice, and we do hypnotherapy in person there, which is in Oakland. You can find that at lionsheartwellness.com and Instagram too, but I never post there.
Okay. Well, I'm
But
putting
yeah.
all your links in the chat so people can follow you and like and subscribe. Um,
Ooh.
and yeah, totally check out Kim's TikTok. It's awesome. um, I'm just like, I think that the way that you bring the practical loving care to this conversation is so special. And I think it's just so necessary. And I see the big open heart, not only from your own experience of like, hey, I don't want this to happen to anybody else. Um, I don't want I don't want people to waste their time or their precious like attention and their energy and their life force on all of this. And I just see your big care here. So Kim, thank you for your work today.
Thank you.
All right. Again, you can, if you loved this, like, share, subscribe it all over, and find Kim, all those different beautiful places. And we will see you same time, same place next week. Thank y'all.